Playing for Change, written by Kelly Brown, illustrated by Johnson Simon. Whoosh, smack. Whoosh, smack. Whoosh, smack. Growing up in Anderson, Indiana, Carl constantly played catch in the backyard with his much older brothers and father. The rhythm of the whoosh of the ball and the smack against the glove was the soundtrack of summer at their home. From the age of 9, Carl worked on his ability to pitch, mastering techniques that even Major League Baseball players were using. His dad enrolled Carl in a local park baseball program, and during the height of the Great Depression, Carl's baseball career began. Carl lived in a neighborhood that included diverse families but was still segregated. He knew that black families were expected to be where they were supposed to be. Whites were on the other side. Even with this expectation, Carl's dad was friends with many black people, which was typically unheard of in the 1930s. His dad's relationships influenced Carl's decisions about future friendships. One afternoon, while Carl and a friend were playing basketball in an alley near downtown, a black child their age walked by. Carl didn't know him, but he walked right over and said, "Do you want to play?" and handed the ball over to the boy. That afternoon, a good friendship was formed between Carl Erskine and Johnny Wilson. Little did Carl know that he would be playing for change for the rest of his life. Carl and Johnny were close that school year and always excited to be together. Carl went to Johnny's house. Johnny ate many meals with the Erskines. In their small town, they even walked to school together every day. They played basketball and baseball all through their school years. Johnny and Carl bonded over sports. It didn't matter that Carl was white and Johnny was black. It wasn't something they talked about. They were just friends. Unfortunately, society at the time had set up rules that made their friendship unusual and sometimes difficult. Johnny couldn't go to the YMCA and swim on a free swim day because black people couldn't be members. Carl would then join Johnny in the city's all-black pool so they could still play together. Carl was the only white kid in the crowd. When Johnny and Carl went to the Paramount Theater together, they scampered up into the balcony, since black people weren't allowed to sit on the main floor to watch movies. Again, Carl was the only white boy that would go upstairs, just to be able to join his friend and enjoy the movie together. According to Carl, the beauty of our friendship was we didn't see each other through the lens of color. Sports continued to shape both Johnny and Carl's lives. Johnny found success playing basketball. He was awarded with the title Mr. Basketball as a high school player, and eventually became a star player for the world-famous Harlem Globetrotters. Carl emerged as an outstanding high school baseball player, even scouted by the major leagues. After graduation from high school, his dream was to play baseball. In 1946, at the age of 19, Carl signed a contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers. As in most parts of the country, color played a part in the business. Baseballs were all white, and so were all the players. People who were black and people who were white were still segregated, or kept separate. This included professional baseball. The Negro League was set up specifically for black baseball players to play at an advanced level, but Major League Baseball, the national pastime, was reserved for white players only. While playing for the Dodgers, Carl made a friend like none other. There was a need for him to play for change. This man was playing baseball for society to change. In 1947, Jackie Robinson joined the Dodgers roster. Jackie was the first black man to play in the major leagues during segregation. Dodgers general manager Branch Rickey, who had seen just how ugly racism could be, signed Jackie to the team. Mr. Rickey wanted his team to be the team that would play for change. Branch Rickey knew he wanted his team to play for change when he coached baseball at Ohio Wesleyan University. The Wesleyan team had a black player on their roster that went with them to play a game at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. When the team arrived at the hotel, the clerk told Charles Thomas, the young black man, that he could not stay at the hotel with the rest of the team. This lit a fire in Mr. Rickey to bring people together on his teams. This is where his search for a diverse baseball team began. Even though Jackie and Carl were famous major league players for the Dodgers, they still were treated differently. Jackie wasn't always allowed to eat in the restaurants with his team or stay in the same hotels as the rest of the team when they traveled to away games. Carl remembered seeing signs that stated, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." This meant they would not serve people who looked like Jackie. As the team traveled from town to town, restrooms, drinking fountains, and bus stops were plainly marked, white on one side and colored on the other. Even on the baseball field, Jackie was called names, and bad words were shouted from the opposing dugouts, fans, and team officials. As Jackie and Carl continued to play baseball together, Jackie noticed something different about Carl and the way he interacted with all people. One day, Jackie went to Carl and thanked him. Carl responded in a confused manner. "I didn't pitch yesterday." Jackie was serious when he replied, No. You went out of the clubhouse and you stopped in front of all those fans pressing against the fence and talked with Rachel and little Jackie." "I appreciate that, Carl." Carl was baffled. He went and said hi to Jackie's wife and child, and he was being thanked for it? Carl chuckled. "If I pitch a good ball game, you can come over and tell me. But that came as natural to me as breathing. I just saw a beautiful lady with a little boy, and I went over." Jackie said to him, "This black and white thing doesn't seem to bother you." "I see life divided. You seem to see life connected." Jackie didn't understand how Carl was so accepting of him and his family, when so many other white people were against him. Carl was excited to reminisce about his good friend Johnny Wilson. Carl shared with Jackie their childhood friendship and all of the things they would do together in their hometown. Through moments like this, Jackie and Carl became friends both on and off the field. Carl was Jackie's teammate for 9 seasons. Jackie retired in 1956 and Carl retired in 1959, but they always kept in touch. Both would attend youth programs and school convocations together. They even helped start a baseball program called Wildcat Baseball in Fort Wayne. More than 5,000 boys and girls of various races, abilities, and disabilities are able to be on the team and enjoy playing for the love of the game. The focus for the league is teamwork and sportsmanship, and the motto is, "Everyone makes the team." Through all of these experiences, Carl watched how people treated his friend. He heard others call Jackie names, not allow him to enter buildings, and not give Jackie credit for the great things he was doing in America. Fans would treat him one way on the field or in uniform, but completely opposite when he was just another plain-clothed man on the street. However, as Carl watched other people, he also watched Jackie. Carl never saw Jackie fight in a parking lot, on a field, or in a restaurant. There is no history anywhere where Jackie ever fought someone who was being mean to him. Carl did see Jackie's patience with fans and reporters. Carl heard Jackie's perseverance when continuing to respond in respectful tones. He admired Jackie's self-control from never yelling at those who openly attacked him. Carl learned a lot by observing how Jackie handled all varieties of unacceptance. He helped America to see how wrong segregation had been and how enriching acceptance had become. Carl did not realize this at the time, but Jackie was teaching and preparing Carl for a major challenge of his own. Wailed the newborn baby. Carl and his wife Betty had 3 children already, but something was different with Jimmy, their youngest son. Along with the cries of the newborn baby, whispers from doctors and nurses were heard in the halls. They used the term mongoloid. This was a hurtful way to describe someone with Down syndrome. Carl didn't understand. His other children were healthy. His wife was fit. He was a pro athlete. How did this happen? It was common practice for doctors to recommend children with disabilities be separated from their families and go live in a hospital or institution. This would allow families to live their life undisrupted. When children were sent away, they were often treated poorly. Although the buildings were called hospitals and institutions, they provided little medical treatment or education. A stigma formed that those who were disabled were not going to be able to function in society or live real lives that required jobs, families, and community. Betty and Carl adamantly disagreed with the physician's recommendation. Betty exclaimed, "No way! I carried this little guy for 9 months. He goes home with us." Carl and Betty went to James Whitcomb Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, where they had more tests done on Jimmy. With the encouragement of doctors, there they began to understand the challenges. They were also more committed than ever to make a good life for their new son. Carl went home to Danny, Gary, and Susan, his older children, to explain their newest sibling would need support and help in their family. Growing up, Jimmy may have been slower learning how to walk, ride a bike, or swim, but he did it surrounded by his family for support. From day one, the 3 older Erskines, athletes themselves, never hesitated to bring friends home or include Jimmy in their activities. Susan even told her family, "I think Jimmy helped my friends to be better people." Similarly to how their father included a neighborhood boy all those years ago, they saw no reason not to let their brother play now. Jimmy grew steadily with guidance and care from his parents. Life moved along for the Erskines, as their schedules were kept full with their 4 children. Jimmy enjoyed the activity as well, never separated or hidden away from his family, but proudly included, no matter where they went. This was not typical in society, and sometimes caused awkward situations outside of the Erskine home. Like any kid, Jimmy loved to cause mischief at times. One of his favorite pastimes was running to his neighbor's home when she was away, banging repeatedly on her back door and setting her 5 poodles into a frenzy. His laughter was heard across the yard as the pups started their high-pitched barking. Unfortunately, this game would set off the neighbor's security alarm, and police would arrive on the scene. With police cars out front, red lights whirling, and neighbors watching, a very embarrassed Betty would have to catch Jimmy and explain to the officers. During this time, Betty and Carl sought to help Jimmy respond appropriately in situations. Carl tried to teach Jimmy to say "no thank you" if there was something he didn't want, instead of grunting or making rude noises. Over and over he tried. This resulted in no progress. Carl felt no success. When Carl returned from work one evening, Betty was frantic and upset. "He did it again, Carl. He ran off to Mrs. Lamy's and set her alarm off. Now you promised Jimmy the next time he did that, you were going to give him a spanking. You've got to do it." Carl was prepared and told Jimmy to head up to his bedroom for the punishment. Jimmy replied, clearly and somberly, "No thank you." Betty and Carl were astounded. Jimmy had understood all along. He was smart. Carl and Betty had a new appreciation for their 8-year-old's abilities, giving them more hope for a brighter future for Jimmy. As progress slowly continued at the Erskine home, progress slowly developed in public too. In 1975, laws passed to benefit children and adults with special needs. Mandatory special education in public schools became a law, even though there were no teachers trained in special education. Schools improvised, college degree programs were created, and suddenly public education was open to all children. Betty and Carl remember Jimmy's first day of school well. Jimmy wasn't nearly as anxious as his mom and dad were. This would be the first time Jimmy would be on his own, without a parent. Finally, the big yellow bus pulled up and the door swung open. Jimmy hopped on and grabbed a window seat as the door closed and the bus took off to get other children. Carl and Betty stood in silence, watching until the bus was out of view. Betty and Carl turned, arm in arm, and a little misty-eyed, to walk back to their house. Passing neighbors' homes, they saw many had been watching how this new adventure would go. From their front doors and windows, some clapped or gave thumbs up, while others waved and smiled encouragingly. To see their neighbors root for them and for Jimmy felt like a real sign that others finally understood that people like Jimmy, indeed all people, needed to be included. While many new services were needed, schools, group homes, job training, another avenue emerged that would help society embrace those with special needs. Perhaps the biggest difference maker yet, Special Olympics. It was a new, exciting, and invigorating way to play for change. Eunice Kennedy Shriver, sister of President John F. Kennedy, started a summer camp at her home for young people with special needs in 1962. Witnessing the difficulties experienced by her sister Rosemary, who had intellectual disabilities, Eunice continued to advocate for their rights and acceptance throughout her entire life. Eunice's tireless work led to the very first Special Olympics Games in 1968 in Chicago. Special Olympics played for the change of those with disabilities to be included. The goal was to put a bright and very public spotlight on ability, not disability. Many events were offered, including long jump, 100-meter dash, softball throw, and swimming. Approximately 1,000 athletes from the United States and Canada competed in those first Special Olympics International Summer Games. Jimmy started competing in Special Olympics in 1970. He enjoyed swimming and track and field events. Jimmy never missed a summer games at the State University. His room is filled with ribbons and medals to prove it. This same year, Eunice contacted Carl. Knowing his background in sports, as well as having a son in Special Olympics, Eunice told Carl he would be one of the professional athletes on the national coaching staff to speak in support of this new movement. Carl spoke to an audience at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. He wore the World Series ring he won in 1955 during the talk. As he finished his speech, he mentioned his ring and the pride he had in owning it. He described his teammates, including Jackie Robinson, and the giddy excitement they felt winning it. He paused and asked, "Could any achievement be greater?" Then he pulled Jimmy's 50-meter freestyle swimming gold medal from his pocket. He asked the crowd to compare the two. Which reward was the greater achievement? The Dodgers' all-professional athletes, including several Hall of Fame players who possessed talent that could lead to a World Series win? Or Special Olympic athletes like Jimmy, who were not expected to succeed in anything. Carl reinforced his concept of achievement with the comparison. The Special Olympics medal, Carl said, represents getting the most out of what you have been given. Carl and Johnny, Jackie in baseball, Jimmy in Special Olympics. These four men were players for the ultimate changes, acceptance and inclusion. Branch Rickey and the Dodgers, Eunice Kennedy Shriver and Special Olympics. They also played for societal change. Both saw an injustice and worked to right it. Society struggles with differences. Jackie and Jimmy represented ways to celebrate differences and strive for what is right. Branch Rickey and Eunice Kennedy Shriver strive to show the success and benefits of inclusion. In life, as in baseball, Carl suffered some losses. Jackie Robinson died in 1972. Johnny Wilson died in 2019. In 2017, Jimmy moved out of the Erskine's house and into a residential program for the first time. Definitely something to be celebrated, but also a sad change for his parents. Even with the losses, all of these people and memories remained with Carl. Jimmy pays weekly visits, now serving as caregiver, even helping his parents put on their socks and straighten their shirts. In addition, Jackie helps keep me alive, Carl says. Frequently, he receives letters and phone calls from students around the country asking what the great game-changing Jackie Robinson was really like. Johnny remains close at heart too. A few years before he died, Johnny sent Carl a gift. It was a little figurine of a black boy and a white boy in sports gear sitting together, wearing their hats sideways. The note with the gift read, "Carl, this is us as kids." Carl treasures it and looks at it every day. He even brought it to Johnny's funeral. There, Johnny's grandson held it up to the people who had gathered and said, "This could be what heaven is like."
This one's for you, Jackie. Play ball.